Welcome everybody to Forza Horizon 4, and today we're taking a look at the 2017 Alpine A110. Now this is a rear mid-engined rear-wheel drive sports car that has been in production since 2017 and is a modern take on the original from the 1960s and 1970s. Not just in terms of the looks, because from the front it does look remarkably like the one from the 70s and 60s, but also in terms of its engineering approach and its dynamics, because yeah, this isn't the most powerful sports car you're going to find out there today, but it is extremely lightweight as it only weighs 2,432 pounds, which means that despite the fact that the engine is only a 1.8 litre turbocharged inline 4 engine producing 248 horsepower and 236 pounds-feet of torque, it is very nearly, if not more so, in terms of acceleration, as quick as some of the heavier, more powerful rivals out there, like a BMW Z4 or a Porsche Cayman. So yeah, it's very impressive in terms of its dynamic capabilities, because yeah, lightweightness obviously means better handling, better braking, better economy, and yeah, means it can make the most of all of that power and torque. So yeah, really like this in a lot of ways, to be honest, especially the interior, which, unlike an Alfa Romeo 4C, which is also a lightweight rear mid-engined rear-wheel drive sports car, is far better than that. It's nowhere near as bland, and I imagine since this is slightly heavier, that it's also better in terms of quality, which I know French cars aren't wholly renowned for their quality, but neither are Italian cars. And yeah, it's also got two boots, one in the front, which is decently sized, you could get at least a couple of bags in there, and a slightly smaller boot at the rear, which yeah, you won't get much in there, but again, it is still something that's a bit more practical than, say, a 4C, which only has a rear boot. And yeah, the engine itself is pretty decent, because not only is it small, so that means it's going to be more economical than any larger engines from other sports cars, but they've taken it from much heavier vehicles like the Espace and the Megane, so they're already it's already an engine that is mass produced in much more, mass-produced cars. So yeah, the fact they've taken it from much heavier vehicles means that this car's engine is not only going to be reliable, because it's mass-produced, like I said, but it's also going to be able to use more of that power than either of those would be able to, because obviously this is infinitely lighter. And yeah, even though it's not as light as an Alfa Romeo 4C, it does have 8 extra horsepower, slightly down on the torque by 2, but yeah, and it is slightly heavier, about 400 pounds, but I think that extra weight is going into making this car a more livable vehicle to drive every day. And yeah, I could easily see driving this on a daily basis, quite frankly, whereas the Alpha 4C is not only a little bit less practical than this, but it's a lot wider and doesn't look anywhere near as comfortable to live with on a daily basis. But nonetheless, this is a sports car, so sports cars need to be driven, and driven hard. So let's get out onto the open road and see what it can do. Now I'm going to come out and say it, and straight away, I love this car. I love what it's got going for it in terms of its engine, the power, torque, acceleration, and even the top speed. But I also love the way it looks. I love the sound of the engine, which is a surprise, because generally inline 4 small capacity engines these days are a little bit over turbocharged, but yeah, this engine, for whatever reason, doesn't sound like it's even really got a turbocharger. I'm sure there's a faint hint of it, but for the most part it is all pure engine noise. It doesn't rev particularly highly, it's only just over 6,000 RPM, but it does sound a lot higher than it actually is. And because it is such a lightweight vehicle, that it's able to be a compromise between, softness in terms of dealing with road bumps and potholes and speed bumps and the like, but it's also sporty enough to be able to deal with, handling around corners at a high rate of speed. So yeah, the fact it weighs so little is helping in terms of not only making this car sportier, but also comfier as well, because the springs don't have to be so hard, because obviously it's not dealing with a lot of weight, and that means that it's a comfier car to deal with as well, which is a win-win, quite frankly. And because it is so little in the way of weight at 2,432 pounds, it means it's able to make the most of all of that horsepower and torque, even though it's not quite as much as, say, a Z4 or a Cayman. and that means it can do 0 to 60 in 4.313 seconds, 0 to 100 in 11.615 seconds, and it will go into a top speed of 165 mile an hour without the electronic limiter, but with the limiter it's 155. So yeah, that 0 to 100 time isn't mightily impressive. That's where the lack of large amount of horsepower is a negative, but outside of that, yeah, that 0 to 60 time is really, really good, aided by the fact it's got a 7-speed dual clutch automatic gearbox, so it's flappy paddle only on this car, which is, I guess, maybe a downside if you're after a more, involved driving experience. But quite frankly, because this car is such a good handling vehicle with amazing brakes and yeah, really good turning, there's no real oversteer or understeer. It's got really good grip to it as well, and it's got that nice sounding engine that the lack of a manual gearbox really isn't too much of an issue for me, though I imagine it would be with some people. But yeah, it's cracking this. I really, really do like it. I know a lot of people like the Alpha Male 4C because it's barely a £2,000 car with 240 horsepower, but this, in all honesty, is better. I think it looks better, sounds better, and it handles better as far as I'm concerned, and because it's not as wide, it's easier to drive on narrower roads. And yeah, again, it's not as quick as the 4C in terms of 0 to 100 time. That's about a second quicker than this, but that 4C is slower to 60, not got quite as high of a top speed even with the limiter off on this car, and yeah, just doesn't handle as nicely as far as I'm concerned. The fact it's so wide but also quite a short car means that it can snap at times in terms of oversteer, whereas this has loads of grip, but you can also have fun with it when the time comes. So yeah, really do like this car, and I'm really glad that they've put it in this game. Hopefully it's going to be in the next Forza Motorsport game, because I feel like this car would excel on a track just as much as it excels on open roads like this. But either way, it's a cracking car and it's well worth getting. It's part of the festival playlist all of the months, so you have to get 50% across the all 4 seasons, should I say, not months. And yeah, I've managed that just by the second season that we just got today. So yeah, you can easily get it yourselves, and it is well worth getting. It's easily one of my favourite vehicles that have been put in by the festival playlist, and that's despite the fact that it's not got a massive engine with 500, 600 horsepower and 200 mile an hour top speed. It's a proper sports car, and it's kind of sports car that we should really be having more of. I know we have the 4C, but outside of that and maybe a Mazda MX-5, there's really not that many lightweight rear-wheel drive cars out there anymore. They're a lot heavier with a lot bigger engines with a lot more power, but at the end of the day they're a lot heavier and a lot less sporty than the likes of this. And I love the fact that it's so similar to the older car, because yeah, it's not a rear-engined car like that one was, but it's still rear-wheel drive. It's still got the engine relatively near the rear end. It weighs very little in comparison to other cars from the time, and yeah, even though it's not got that much power, makes the most of it because it's got so little weight in the weight as well. And I love the looks of it as well. I know it looks a little bit retro, like the Minis and the Fiat 500s of today, but it's not so much of a homage that you can instantly say, oh, that just looks like a rip-off. But at the same time, it still looks really good as well, and I really do like the rear as well, with its single exhaust in the middle and those lights. So yeah, cracking vehicle. Really got no real problems with it whatsoever. It's got enough practicality to be used on a daily basis. It's not so hard it's going to break your spine like some sports cars do. And even though there is a A110S available, which has 288 horsepower, so that's 40 extra horsepower and a little bit less in the way of weight, and it's got harder springs and it's more of a track car, I'd have this any day over that, to be honest, because it's a better all-rounder, and yeah, still a cracking sports car in its own right, whereas that A110S I imagine would be a lot tougher to drive on a daily basis, while not really being all that much quicker. It's only 0.1 of a second quicker to 60, so yeah, it doesn't really sound worth it, to be honest, especially considering it would be a lot worse to drive on a daily basis, whereas this you could enjoy all year round. And yeah, a sports car that can do that while being hugely fun to drive is always a win-win as far as I'm concerned. Nonetheless, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.